led me to decide to come out publicly with my story because I felt alone.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Come and Clean Podcast. This is your host, Peter O. Esteves, episode 71 of Come and Clean Podcast today with none other than legendary Zeke Thomas. Hello, Zeke. How are you? And welcome to Come and Clean Podcast.
I am wonderful, and thank you for having me. And the legendary title. I think that's just code for you've been doing this a while and you're old.
You're nowhere near as old as I am. So, let's not go there, please. For the audience, Zeke is a DJ. He's worked on reality shows. He has worked with Jay-Z, Ludacris, Pitbull, and Zoop Dogg. His biggest hero is his father, a true legend and a Hall of Famer, Isaiah Thomas.
Definitely, he can get the legendary title.
You get it by default. That's what legacies are for. When you do good work and when you welcome good family energy, that's what legacies are for. How are you, Zeke? Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being willing to share your story with our community.
No, thank you for having me. I'm really excited as we met in Clubhouse during a global pandemic, and it seems to be a time when connection is really what we're seeking. So when you talk about legacy, I'm most proud that I'm able to look both my parents in the eye and say, I'm a respectable son. I have definitely gone through my trials and tribulations with mental health, substance abuse. Yes, as many are aware, yes, I am a sexual assault survivor. But my main focus right now is in the physical healing and mental healing realm. And I'm really excited that I've been given the opportunity to explore that.
And you're right. First and foremost, thank you for being so open about your private life. As a public figure and your family being a public family for that matter, often often celebrities and celebrity families choose to maintain certain things that are private as private, right? Not realizing the impact that their stories have in the community and the public at large. And although we recently met, as you mentioned in Clubhouse, I have known about you, known about your father, known about your story, because I'm passionate. Number one, I've been in recovery 22 years. And number two, I am too a victim of sexual abuse. Unlike you, my sexual abuse happened from within my household, one of my brothers. Sexual abuse is sexual abuse is sexual abuse, right? It doesn't matter.
Right.
So with that in mind, I want to thank you for your courage, and I want to thank you for your openness and your willingness to share your story, because our stories are the story of many. And the moment that we share, we open up, not only do we heal, but we help other heals in the process, and we give them permission to begin to share their story. You are the son of a legendary basketball player. Your family has been in the public eye for many years, but you were actually sexually assaulted at the age of 12 years old. Tell us a little bit about that and what impact has that had in your
life? The impact that my story or the impact that my family's growing up upbringing has had on me, I believe it's made me more open and more able to adapt and receptive to all different types of people. It's made me um, also vulnerable in that sense. I am naturally a very forgiving and loving person. I am a man of service, but also that comes with definitely protecting oneself, and sometimes being a bit suspicious of people's motives, whether that is people trying to get in touch with my father, or even perceiving myself as having my father's wealth, whatever that is. Um, I think the most difficult thing for me in terms of my upbringing was realizing who my dad was. And I like to separate that as, there's Isaiah Thomas, the athlete, the basketball player, the Hall of Famer,
Figure.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
there's Isaiah Thomas, the businessman, which often gets overlooked in terms of the things that he's done in business. But this isn't an interview about him. I think that the most important thing is that I've just learned so much about compassion from my dad and from my mom. Um, yes, there were difficulties in terms of, especially when my family moved to New York City, and I kind of realized, hey, my dad's like a real celebrity. Like, it was different being in Detroit or Indiana. Um, those are both big cities, but not, any size of New York in terms of the media market. Um, so becoming a bit of a uh, celebutante in the New York city um, market, in terms of myself getting written about in the newspaper and such. Those type of things were not expected or wanted. Yes, I was a kid who made some mistakes, got arrested. Again, as you know, I fell into substance abuse, which was hidden mostly from the public, but definitely something that affected me and my family.
Let me
Um,
let me ask you to pause and hold that thought for a second right there, because there's a lot to unpack right there. How did moving to New York and realizing the celebrity status of your father so impactful, how did that affect you as a young boy? Number one, that's my first question. And then my second question is, did that also contribute to maybe you feeling out of place, maybe you feeling having to keep up to your father's standards?
um, I think it affected me as a young boy. Yes, it was a constant measuring stick of me trying to measure myself against my father, um, which I have realized isn't fair. It isn't fair for anybody to measure themselves really against anybody,
Right.
but especially against somebody who reached the pinnacle of their success, who reached the pinnacle of their chosen profession. I have strived to be the best person that I can be, and I champion that more than anything. Yes, I am a world class DJ and hang my hat on all the service work that I've done. But in terms of comparing myself to my dad, that was definitely a hurdle that I had to get over.
Well, and you're also you're more than a world recognized DJ. You're a producer. You're a singer. You're multi-talented, and you've been on reality shows, and you've done a lot more than that. But I think one of the reasons that attracted me to ask you to come on the podcast after having a brief interaction in Clubhouse is your humanity aspect, your passion for helping and serving others, and therefore you have displayed that through becoming an advocate for what was a tragedy in your life at the age of 12, being abused, and actually taking that platform and turning what somebody will call a mess into a message, and becoming an advocate for men and for women to speak out about sexual abuse. So uh, tell us a little bit about that, and what was it that inspired you to take your message public?
What inspired me to take my message public was more so the fact that I felt that I was alone. And I've dealt with this question a lot. What does it mean to be accepted by a community? And what does it mean to be welcomed by a community? Those are two very different things. And I never felt accepted by the LGBT community as a whole in terms of the hierarchy of, I'll just say, the pretty white boys who I clamored to get attention from, or, you know, try to get involved with. Another point is that I feel that we put a lot of emphasis on youth in the LGBT community, and not a lot of emphasis on the wisdom of our elders. Um, so that right there led me to decide to come out publicly with my story, because I felt alone. I felt that nobody was hearing me, and all the different opinions that I was getting in terms of, hey, should you go on Good Morning America? Should you talk about this? I felt that it was my responsibility um, to share my story. And yes, I was the first classified Black queer man to go public with a story of sexual assault on such a major platform like Good Morning America. I didn't realize the impact that it would have at all. I really just wanted to scream and shout it out. But here I am now today, walking the walk, talking the talk, able to go to therapy and able to speak and help others. And that's my purpose in life right now.
Wow, powerful words, Zeke. I find something very interesting that you said a minute ago. I felt I was not accepted. There's a big difference between accepted and welcome, but you only refer that to the LGBT community. Um, but you also have, in other interviews, talk about being Black and being gay. So tell us a little bit about the aspect of being Black and being gay in the Black community. What's the
Well,
what?
I also will put emphasis on, yes, I have a certain amount of privilege or cachet from coming from a celebrity family. So being welcomed into many rooms, um, some that I still, don't believe I deserved to be in at the time, but yet I was able to lend my voice, and people listened and respected what I had to say. Other times I was just the token, so to speak. Um, So, yes, I have had a hard time being accepted in a lot of rooms, being taken seriously, but yet always welcomed, always invited for the photo op, so to speak. Yes, the Black community has embraced me, and then others have not. And I think that's just the way of the world. But what is the most difficult and things that we are finding out as America finally makes a giant leap forward, since they haven't done it since the late 60s in terms of addressing systemic racism. You are now seeing um, Black people, brown people, LGBT people, white people come together. And I'm very careful actually with using color coded language, because I do like to promote that, I am well aware, and I believe many people around the world are well aware that America is designed as a caste system, with white Americans sitting on top and minorities below. If you got 400 years of free labor, you'd be sitting at the top too. So I really tell people, if we really want to get over this racial gap, we need to start referring to ourselves in our nationalities. Many people who immigrated to America or migrated to America from Ireland, Italy, even Latin American countries have given up their Irish American, Italian American statuses for just being white, even Jewish American, just being white, because it is easier to excel in America by being white. But just as classified Black people have been persecuted throughout history in this country, Italians were not welcome, Irish were not welcome, Latinos not welcome, and so forth and so on. But we need to truly take a look at, why do we define skin color when we all know that we originate from a Black woman?
Wow, that was powerful and beautifully said. Thank you so much. As you almost left me speechless there. And I want to clarify a point. I want to clarify that the systemic racism, I have felt it. I'm of Mexican descent. I was born in Mexico City. I migrated to the United States at the age of 10 years old. My family was not a privileged family. My father was a blue labor worker. My mom had a sixth grade education. I come from a family of 13. So I have lived and experienced a lot of the discrimination that many have felt in a white America. And I don't see the world as white or black or brown. I just see the world as a world. Unfortunately, not everybody has that vision, right? But for the purpose of being able to make the conversation relatable to those that do see themselves as labels, right? Because it is important that a lot of people, we still have the tendency of gravitating to our cultures, to our beliefs, to our roots, right? So it is important for them to understand that the conversation, our point of views are very important, and that's how we see the world. But we also respect the way that others see the world, right? Um,
Exactly. I definitely respect the way others see the world, but just as you pointed out, as you have a worldly view, there are many people. In fact, I'm baffled. When I first moved to New York, lived in the city, and then lived in the suburbs. I knew people who lived in the suburbs who are 30 minutes away from New York City, but had never been to New York City. So if you can't even go to New York City or outside of your radius in, let's say, Owensboro, Kentucky, or even outside of Mexico City. You have to see the world and experience different cultures, different people, and different point of views to really shape your mind as a human being. I really believe that if you're just around like-minded people the entire time of your life, and if that like-minded person, I've heard many stories of men, women saying thank you during this time of civil unrest, saying thank you for stopping my family's history of perpetuating racism, systemic racism, and bigotry. Um, but that's just information. That's just education. That's just reaching out to a conversation. I know many racists who love hip hop, and
Right.
that's even an interesting dichotomy in itself. And then there are many countries around the world that ban hip hop music because hip hop music originally um, was the music of the rebellion. It still is, Fight the Power, Chuck D, Don't You Love America, Keith Sweat, there are or Curtis Blow. There are many revolutions in hip hop music that aren't expressed in many other forms of music around the world.
We're going to talk a little bit more about your experiences and the difficulties in your journey from addiction and recovery and all of that. But I want to talk about young Zeke. I want to talk about young Zeke when he went on an internship at Hot 97 in New York at the age of 16, and his passion for DJing was born there. Tell us a little bit about him. That's the guy I want to hear. That's the guy I want the audience to hear.
So, closing my eyes while still focusing on you and transporting myself back into my younger self, I was just so happy to be included. Um, I was doing the mailroom work. I was carrying records. I was, getting waters on photo shoots. And it's actually interesting. I can remember the hip hop artist Fat Joe. I was assisting on his photo shoot, basically being the gopher boy. And yet, um, he knew who I was by meeting me at one point, but said that, I was very professional in my role. There's never a job that at that time I wouldn't do because I wanted just the acceptance and just to learn, just the knowledge, just to sit behind these great DJs, these great audible auditors on the radio. I was just fascinated by it. And the younger me, I used to get up, take the train, get on the subway, show up. It really was my first taste of adult life, in a sense, of a real job, of a time where I saw possibility and a future um, outside of the shadow of my father.
Very interesting. And I keep listening to some of your words, and you have used accepted, welcome, and just in this last sentence, you used included. Okay. And even as far as back as the shadow of my father, unbeknownst to us, a lot of times we take on that responsibility or that shame or that guilt or that feeling of less worthiness. But it has nothing to do with your father, right? It has nothing to do with, that was completely unbeknownst to your dad. Your dad had no idea. Your dad was doing what most parents do, right? Their job as a parent. And a lot of times we become so entangled on our own emotions as young adults or teenagers, and we don't know how to communicate how we're feeling and what we're processing and how we are separating or excluding ourselves from being part of instead of being part of. So, what would now with the experience and the knowledge and what you have been through, what would you tell that 16-year-old Zeke about how he felt back then?
What I would tell that 16-year-old Zeke about how he felt back then was there are many people in this world who aren't trying to see you be successful. Um, there are many people in this world that you are in of entertainment who had their chance and didn't make it and now are stagnant, and yourself rising. um, I wish that I at that time did not get caught up in alcohol and later drugs and the fast life of entertainment that I was introduced to at a young age, that then would spiral into abusing those things um, to cope. And my mother and father barely drink,
Yeah.
so I am definitely the outlier where it comes to um, attempting to use these substances, even marijuana. But I would just really want to harp to that young man that, yeah, life is difficult and finding your tribe is difficult, but you have such a great family that you can turn to.
I love it.
And I wish that I would have taken more advantage of that as a younger boy. I think a lot of teenagers, they want to spread their wings and get out and yada yada yada. Um, but I had moved around a lot. I basically did. I freshman and sophomore year, I lived in Indiana, and junior and senior year of high school, I lived in New York. Two very different places, and just at that point, you just want to make friends and fit in as fast as you can.
Right.
And I think that I latched on to people who were unhealthy for me.
Well, a lot of times, and I'll tell you this from personal experience, okay? Uh, I wanted to escape my reality. And my reality wasn't something my reality was really impoverished. It was sexual abuse, it was physical abuse, it was poverty, it was a father that was unstable, it was a mother that had I'm convinced mental health issues. Now, don't get me wrong, I love and respect and admire my parents because they did their best. That's what they knew how to do. I'm not, this is not a condemn on my parents. This is just me as an adult being able to take a 30,000 foot view into what my life was back then and realizing, gosh, for a long time, I wanted to escape my reality. Can you imagine the pressure of my parents wanting to escape theirs? you know, uh,
Mhm.
having 13 children and wondering how they're going to feed them, how they're going to support it, how they're going to take care of them. So, and those escape systems, those ways of me wanted my reality to be different, which I keep hearing the same thing in you, when turn into alcohol, sex, power, control, anything that would take me away from that environment. But the reality is that I kept coming back to me. And what needed to change was me, not my environment, not wealthier parents, not more educated parents, not being richer, not being. I needed to change. I needed to accept me. I needed to love me. And when I did that, I was able to put the bottle down, focus on recovery, and focus on making my message and empowering others to be able to not fall prey to their own thoughts, their own behaviors. Now, when when did your career as a DJ take off, and where are you at today with it?
My career as a DJ took off. Um, I'd say when I was 2021, to be honest with you. I started DJing clubs, and then I got to DJ during NBA All Star Weekend, a few Super Bowl events, and I became in demand for my talent, which really felt so good. Um, Now my career has gotten to shift, which I like, away from the clubs. That's less pandemic related and more um, career choice in terms of getting able to DJ for a lot more charitable events, political events, and just more events that I get to lend my skill set to that aren't just about popping bottles in the club.
So has that shifted as a result of your sobriety, or has that shifted as a result of your personal choices or maturity as a young adult?
I think it's definitely a result of my personal choices, and definitely let me be clear, I don't want to mislead anybody in saying that I'm 100% sober, but I feel my sobriety, I have gotten away from crystal meth, cocaine, ecstasy, any other hard substances
Yeah, and let
that
me
I was.
yeah, and let me clarify something because I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Everybody's sobriety is different, right? Everybody's journey is different. Everybody's addictions and vices are different, right? I'm the type of guy that, I never touched any drugs, but don't give me any alcohol because I'm going to drink yours first and everybody else's in the room. Okay. And once I did that, I was out of control. I was dancing on tables. I was hitting on your wife. I was doing everything that was despicable to men. And so everybody's journey is different. And what we have discovered, even I have discovered in my journey of recovery, is that there's multiple ways of what addiction is. Addiction has a different meaning for a lot of different people. And it's an individual choice. And you may be addicted. I was addicted to alcohol, but I tried a few other choices of drugs, and I never care for them. They didn't do anything for me. Okay. Um, so there's no judgment here or any of that. That's not where the conversation was going. I wanted to clarify because I think it's important for people to realize that our biology as human beings is completely different, and what might impact you doesn't impact somebody else.
Right. And I also think that it is important to clarify, especially around this conversation of addiction and sobriety. I believe I was more addicted to acceptance. I finally found a crew who accepted me. And although that crew was doing bad things for my body, for my health, I liked them.
It's
And
good for your soul.
yes, but letting go of them was the correct thing to do for my evolution. Um, and I am I definitely regret that chapter of my life. But the people who truly cared about me, and I do remember one person saying to me when I was at my lowest, they said to me, "Hey, there's going to come a time when we won't be friends anymore. We won't hang out anymore. You have a bigger purpose, and that's okay. I want you to know that." And at the time, I didn't really, register what he was saying, but I think that it is so admirable for somebody who um was not going to stop doing drugs, but knew that eventually I would make that decision and he wasn't going to hold me back. In fact, he was going to root me on and has in my staying out of the riffraff and getting out of that scene.
Wow. And that's very commendable in that individual. I also find, I find in the rooms of recovery, and I don't know how active you are in some of the rooms, whether you are or not, and that doesn't really matter, but I'm just sharing my personal experience. I find in the rooms of recovery that there's a tremendous amount of people that are very capable individuals, very intelligent, very creative, very artistic, very bohemian, uh, but that we suffer a lot of that feeling of being part of, that inclusiveness, that being accepted, the being somebody else's shadow. Whether those things are real or not, they exist within us. But there's also another parallel that goes along with addiction or the escapisms, as I like to call them at times, is mental health. And a lot of times it goes undiagnosed because we can't treat something that we try to hide, right? Or that we don't know it exists. So, um,
Correct. That even, my therapist, literally when I committed to therapy and I told him that I was, struggling with addiction, he said to me, he said, "Well, we can either treat your mental health or your addiction, but we can't treat both at the same time. So you need to make a decision." And I made the decision to get clean so that I could deal with my mental health issues. It took a lot of willpower. I didn't, go to a rehab facility. I'm actually very thankful that, I actually told a friend of mine, I said, "Can you just give me 60 days and just be my crutch for 60 days? Keep me in line, keep me eating right. Let's go to the gym. Let's, just do stuff to not enable me to hang out with person X." And that person did that. And I will forever be grateful because after those 60 days, I've been able to flourish and continue to grow. Um, but yeah, you can't do both. You definitely have to heal the addiction, heal the mind, and then as I'm learning, as I'm dealing with a lot more holistic medicines such as chiropractic or Reiki, I've discovered that there is so much of my trauma that is stored in my body in terms of muscle memory that is being released through these therapies in ways that I couldn't couldn't imagine. Leaving the chiropractor and having um, flashbacks. Um, I've been told, that's normal. The body, the nervous system, it remembers those feelings. And I think that, and I encourage everybody to treat their health in a full spectrum way. Now, you have to eat right, you have to exercise, you have to do those things. But truly, after you, do the mental health, there is this component of physical trauma that is stored in the body. Um, and, all pain, all suffering starts with inflammation. So if for whatever reason you got tense shoulders and you say, "Yeah, I'm so stressed, I got these tense shoulders, I need a rub, I need a whatever," there's a reason why your shoulders are tense other than maybe your posture or whatever. Your shoulders are tense probably because you are stressed or you have ignored an issue for so long that shoulder inflammation has become chronic.
Absolutely. And the reality is that we as humans, we create it. We create whatever that symptom is. The subconscious remembers it and the body stores it. Okay. And then we have to treat all of it. We have to treat all of it. Whatever, you're doing it through holistic medicine. I've done that through prayer, meditation, journaling, exercise, developing new habits, retraining my brain and my body to get rid of that stored trauma, and my brain to create new thoughts, new ideas. And by the way, this is not to promote Joe Dispenza, but this is an incredible book that I've been reading, Becoming Supernatural, and he talks exactly about that. He talks about getting rid of all those bad habits and all those bad thoughts, and developing and retraining your mind, your body, your spirit to think differently, act differently, and do differently. Because we train ourselves and our bodies to be programmed a certain way, and if we don't break those patterns, that's all the body and the mind remembers. Now, Zeke, you exit a lot of the behaviors that were self-destructive. You become public about being sexually abused, and as an adult, you are abused again. Tell us about that experience and what impact has that for you as an adult, but also your experience as a young man and going through the process of therapy and healing has helped you overcome that perhaps even faster than the first time around.
When I was younger, I didn't fully process it. So then when I was older and it happened again, and it happened in a worse way, I realized and remembered what had happened even more. And I was just angry, just angry. And I lashed out. I lashed out at my family, lashed out at my friends. I felt unprotected. And that isn't where anybody should be at all.
When you decided to come out as being homosexual, what age were you and why did you decide to come out? And how did your family take it?
I was 20 years old, and my family, they said they already knew. So it was more hard for me to come out to my friends. In college, I actually lived with a roommate who defined himself as homophobic. Yet he was my friend. And that was something that was hard for me to accept, difficult for me to feel safe in a sense, knowing his views and then having to live with that person. Um, Now, I don't know if I was able to change his views, um, but I know that I was able to open his mind. But I always was nervous um, of my friend who said, "I'm homophobic. Your lifestyle bothers me."
How did you feel when your parents told you we already knew? Was that a sense of relief?
My parents telling me that they already knew was definitely a relief. Um, However, there's no manual for then, okay, your parents accept you, but now you're out in the world. And my parents were not gay, so they couldn't teach me healthy behaviors, where to go, where to seek out, how to date, how to meet people, even how to have sex, what lube to buy. This simple things like that, that you really have to figure out on your own. And that is the sad thing that I feel again, as gay men, we put such emphasis on youth and beauty and not enough on wisdom of older gay men who lived through an AIDS pandemic and now are comparing this pandemic that we're living in now to the AIDS pandemic in terms of young gay men traveling around the world chasing parties, feeling that, invincible. Um, and I just wish that I had had someone, to hold my hand in a sense and always be there to check on me. My parents, they obviously, as I said, they're not partiers, they're not drinkers, so I didn't expect them to go to clubs with me. Um, but it was always a want to have somebody with me to be able to go to that bar or club or hang out, with my parents in, the gay scene. Um, my dad marched in the Pride Parade, the same parade that I actually marched in, but we didn't march together. He marched, with the NBA contingency, and I was, marching, with another contingency. And even though he marched in the parade, he didn't march with me. And that hurt. Um, but I still knew I had his support. But there's something special that I didn't get to experience yet in terms of, hey, my family, we're all at a gay bar and we're having fun.
And, it's very interesting what you said a minute ago. You know, typically in many families, and this did not happen in my family. I never had that conversation about sex with my parents. I never had that. I now have a 19-year-old son, and I had conversations with him about sex, about contextual STDs, about all kinds of stuff, right? Because I wanted to have an open line of communication with my son. Talk to him about addiction. Talk to him about drugs. I talked to him about um, sexuality. You name it, things that I never, ever, ever touch with my son. But I can see on how in the typical, if there is something typical out there, family, these issues I talked about, they're discussed and they're normal conversation. They're part of an integral family conversation. It's part of a family nucleus. But I can see where it would be very difficult when somebody, when a young man or a young daughter comes to us at the age of 21 or 22, and as a parent tells us that they're gay. I mean, how do you have that conversation? How do you talk to your children about? You said something that is very important about the behaviors, the sex, dating. A lot of those things that are not talked about, and even if you are fully loving and caring, compassionate parent, and you accept your children for whatever they chose to be or they are, okay. Um,
Yeah, you don't have that experience.
you don't have that
It's
experience. So how
you
do
don't
we?
have the experience.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
and how terrible is that? So how do we? How can society? How can the collective be able to help communities to be able to navigate through those things? What resources are there available? Because I've never, and I'm being humbly honest and respectful. And if I say something inappropriate, please forgive me in advance. But but how do we educate men and women to what resources are available and how to navigate that journey? Because if it's already hard enough feeling that you're not accepted by society, but not knowing what to do is even worse.
well, I think, it starts young. It starts young. Um, kids nowadays can, look up anything on their phone. From porn to whatever, they're getting early exposed. But I can remember in sex ed class, or the week that we talked about sex in school. Many schools don't teach sexual education anymore in terms of the public school system, which I feel is a huge disservice. And if they are teaching it, they're not talking about homosexual sexual activities, or even talking about the reality issues. A lot of some schools teach abstinence still, and teaching abstinence to a young teenage boy is pretty it's a
It's right.
crapshoot, you know.
It's going against the law of nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what I would encourage, more resources to be available, how more resources can be available, is that we as a society, as a government, even as corporations, things are improving in terms of understanding of queer people. I mean, queer people are now more than ever on television. Yes, representation can get better in terms of not showing stereotypes. For a while, you always saw Black people playing the criminal. Um, it'd be nice to not see a gay person being overtly flamboyant or etc. Um, but you are starting to see some various representations. I applaud. There's, not to give a plug, but um, Chicago Fire had a trans male firefighter that was Black. And that was definitely a moment in my mind in terms of watching television, like, wow, like, look at that. So representation is definitely key. You want to see somebody who looks like you or acts like you that you can relate to. You want a role model. Many of my role models growing up, um, besides my father and mother, etc., they didn't look like me, they didn't act like me. Michael Jackson was one of my biggest role models, but I still can't moonwalk. um,
I
but
can't dance.
exactly. So it's just showing, nowadays there are more people to look up to, like a Billy Porter, or even a Billie Jean King for an older generation. People who have, trailblazed and fought and done things, to be commended by, to be commended for, but are not as accessible. Now in social media, I'm very accessible. You send me a DM, I respond, or I don't. You send other people DMs, they respond, they don't. The accessibility of knowledge being able to be passed down is a lot more available. And I hope that more people with large platforms, large number platforms, I know people who have millions of followers or hundreds of thousands of followers who didn't even post during, the height of Black Lives Matter, or even themselves being gay and posting about LGBT rights, because they feel they don't want to alienate their audience of whatever e-commerce money they're able to receive. But we all have a responsibility. And if you have a platform of over 500,000 people following you that you can influence, and influence in a positive way that even benefits yourself, not alone the world, why aren't you doing that? What's holding you back? Is that, $1,000 influencer check that you get from some brand really worth that much from you not posting about, Black Lives Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter, or even, how many times have we seen, because Latino males are now being shot at a rate that is similar to the rate of black males being shot by the police, but that's not talked about. um, Black trans women, again, not talked about. um, these things are right in front of our eyes, but yet the people who are in power or the people who have influence have decided to ignore them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting that, as you mentioned, social media has given us a lot of visibility, has given us a lot of transparency. And as we see in this recent election, has also, numbers and numbers of people came out, of influencers and celebrities came out in support of our president-elect, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris, in Vice President Kamala Harris, and they show overwhelming support. Yet there's also the feeling out there that some issues, as you mentioned, are not being talked about, are being blindsided, are being omitted, are not being, an influencer with a couple of million people is a small community, it's a city, it's a town. I mean, that's very, very powerful. And thereby goes my next question. Do you believe that social media or the social media platforms are infringing on our rights by censoring the content that we post, and even by choosing to ban President Trump from Twitter? What's your stance on that? And this is not a political conversation. This
I
is
know this is not definitely not a political conversation, but I do, I believe that three of the most things that are quoted, that many people haven't read, are the First Amendment, the book 1984, and excuse me, the last one being First Amendment 1984. Oh, and the Bible, and the Bible. I believe that, free speech, yes, is given to some, not many, but it is free speech against the government. And Twitter, Facebook, all of these other platforms, they're not owned, thankfully, by the government. Many other countries, China, for example, they have state-run social media platforms. Um, but I do feel it was appropriate. Uh, excuse me. It was appropriate to block President Trump from Twitter and other platforms because he was inciting violence. And I do believe that even if people say hate speech, I've been called, the F word, the N word, many other, derogatory things, but they sting, but that person is allowed to say them. And I have to swallow it and move on. However, when you have so much influence, such as the president of the United States, um, or a major news corporation, and you are putting out propaganda, things that are knowingly false, I definitely believe it is the right and the um, responsibility of that platform to shut it down. I mean, you see even, food. There was a whole food revolution on, back in the early 2000s, 2010s. Even McDonald's started putting finally real chicken in their chicken nuggets.
Sure, and we had it with tobacco, we had it with alcohol, we had it with everything. It's a course of cultures, right? Different
Yes.
cultures have different agendas and different values that we want either carry forward or kill. Bottom line.
Yes.
Zeke, where are you today? What projects are you working on?
So I am in New York City or New York. I'm actually right now I'm at my parents' house, but I am in New York, and currently I am Chief Marketing Officer um, for Isaiah International, which is a holding company founded by my father. I get to work on projects mainly dealing with our company, Sherlon Champagne, which is the first African American owned champagne in the United States and fastest growing. Um, Also, deeply involved in the CBD and THC space. I really believe that hemp, just like it did 8,000 years ago, will again change the world and save us from this climate disaster that we are at an accelerated space moving towards, whether hemp is replacing plastics or even just planting the plant and letting it grow. Hemp was banned in the United States for a while and stopped being grown because um, major wealthy people wanted tobacco and cotton to be the main crops that were exported, not hemp, which was indigenous to the United States and to many other places around the world. Actually, a caveat and a special fact that I love to point to is that during the Revolutionary War, the Union soldiers' uniforms were made from hemp, not cotton. Um, so the things that I'm doing right now, I'm definitely focusing a lot more and leaning hard into social justice and wanting to get more involved in our governmental system. Whether that's one day, I'll run for office, who knows? But I definitely want my voice to be heard, and I want to participate in our democracy.
Well, and I want to thank you in advance for considering that because I think we need new, fresh minds and new, fresh ideas in our government system. I think part of the problem that we are facing today as a country and as a world is the fact that we are operating on a governmental system that has not been revamped over 200 years, in over 200 years. And those ideas, those ideals, and even some of the Constitution amendments are not in correlation with the views in modern times. And I think it's time to be able to bring fresh blood, fresh ideas into the system. Um, that's evolution, that's change, that is growth. Where can people find you in social media besides Clubhouse?
Zeke underscore Thomas, Zeke underscore Thomas, Thomas. I am a frequent user of Instagram. I'm not that much of a tweeter, although I am starting to get back on, and I just started to get back on Snapchat as well, but mostly Instagram. And definitely I'll be popping in and out of various clubhouse rooms. And I'm pretty accessible, and I love to have good conversations with good people and appreciate all viewpoints.
Sick Thomas, entrepreneur, DJ, advocate, and possibly a future political candidate. Sick,
Possibly, yes.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Peter, for having me. It was truly an honor.